Hello and welcome to Full Tech Ahead. I am your host, Amanda Razani, and I'm excited to be here today with Bart Teeter. He is the Director of Fleet and Operational Safety at Bot Auto. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being on.
Happy to have you on the show. Can you share a little bit about your background and then what led you to Bot Auto?
Yeah, you bet. As you said, now I'm the director of fleet and operational safety at Bot Auto, and at some point we'll have to tell everybody what Bot Auto is. I guess we're a level four autonomous truck developer. That is, we are building, developing Class 8 trucks, tractor trailers that will drive themselves with no human intervention. And so, how I got here, prior to this job, I spent 26 years with the Texas Highway Patrol, mostly in the commercial vehicle enforcement space, so dealing with truck enforcement and regulation. And in the back end of my career with the state, I became the primary point of contact for all things autonomous within the Texas Highway Patrol. If a new developer came to Texas, they reached out to me or they reached out to my friends over at the Texas Department of Transportation, and then we referred them to each other so that we could help people navigate the regulatory landscape, the safety landscape. And so I became more and more involved in that, got to travel around the country talking about this stuff. So ultimately, I decided this was the funnest part of my job. This was the part that I enjoyed most. So when the opportunity came to retire after a full career at Texas Highway Patrol, I had a great opportunity, so I came to work for Bot. So now just continuing kind of that messaging, just talking about, like I said, I like to say preaching the gospel of autonomy and what we're going to do to make the highway safer and more efficient. Prior to that, prior to the Highway Patrol time, I was in the military, did a total of 23 years in between the Army and the Air Force Reserve, so retired from that. So kind of on this mission to collect pensions. As I get well into midlife. So that's where I'm at now. This is kind of a third career for me. So we're having fun with that. And as you know, long time San Angelo, Texas resident, kids grew up there. Love West Texas. That's one of the things I love about Bot Auto is we are not only operating in Texas, but we are a Texas company. We're headquartered out of Houston, Texas, out in the Katy area. But I love working for a Texas company that's making things better in Texas.
Well, first of all, of course, thank you for your service. But second, what an awesome journey to come to this new profession in autonomous trucking. It seems like the last 5 years or so, it's really ramped up in the autonomous vehicle space in general. Can you share your thoughts about that? How prominent are autonomous vehicles at the moment, and what do you see the future looking like?
Well, right now it depends where you're standing, and autonomy kind of it's funny if I walked out on the street today and asked people what they think of when we talk about autonomous vehicles. Some are going to go with they're going to think of Tesla, right, and the things that Tesla are doing on the personal ownership side, and you know their claims over there. Then there's going to be folks that think about the robo taxi side where uh, right now, depending on where you live, you may see what seems like a proliferation of driverless Uber type, ride sharing cars. Really, the biggest player in that space is Waymo, and they're San Francisco, they're in Austin, they're in they're big in the Phoenix metro area. I was just in Atlanta this week. I'm seeing them in Atlanta now. So they're spreading all over the place. But there's other players in that space as well, Volkswagen, and some others, Neuro. So that particular part of the space is like I said, it's proliferating a little bit. There's probably, but on a grand scale, there's probably several hundred to 1,000 of those around the country. Maybe, and I could be low on that because Waymo has spread quite a bit. So You'll see those a lot in your major cities. On my side of it, on the trucking side, the freight side, we're still small. I mean, we're numbering in the dozens of autonomous trucks, and the autonomous trucks are really everybody. You know, we talk about the trucks driving themselves, and they do that every day on our trucks on Interstate 10, Bot Auto between San Antonio and Houston. But we have a driver sitting in the seat, a safety driver, a fallback driver at this point. So there's those number in the dozens between the several companies that are doing that, and mostly you're going to see those in Texas because everybody, regardless of where they're headquartered, has come to Texas because Texas is we're tech friendly, we're business friendly, the regulatory burdens of doing what we do in testing in Texas are much lower than some other states. So really fortunate to have that leadership from the state that's allowing this technology to develop and flourish here in Texas.
So, is your goal to eventually have completely driverless trucks delivering goods?
Absolutely. So the business model for Bot Auto and the others in our space is we talk about the middle mile. And we talk about hub to hub operations. Currently, we at Bot we have a hub in Katy, Texas, and we have a hub in San Antonio. Our trucks will drive themselves on that middle mile. And eventually, obviously, as we perfect that route, we'll expand that. Maybe we go south and we start picking up some, a San Antonio to Laredo route back and forth. We can go east west. Stay. One of the big things is the other reason everybody's in Texas and everybody's in the South is the weather is much friendlier for autonomy. We're a heavily sensor based system between high definition cameras, lidars, 3D radars. So if operating in Wisconsin or Minnesota in January or February, you worry about things like ice accumulation and sensor degradation. So we're down here, but as we expand, yeah, we're looking. Ultimately, we will. That is the goal. No driver on the trucks in those dedicated lanes, and so that we feel like that provides a couple things. One, 26 years in the highway patrol, I investigated a lot of crashes. I reviewed a lot of crashes that folks that work for me investigated, and 95% of those crashes somebody did something wrong, right? I mean, it was a human error that did something. Don't get me wrong, there's very good human drivers. Humans are very good drivers. They do things very well until they don't, and then that's where we have a mess. We have to tell people our trucks ultimately will not drive drunk, will not drive tired, will not drive distracted, will not drive angry. Our trucks are 100% focused. Our driving system is 100% focused on the driving task 100% of the time. And with that sensor suite that we talked about, those cameras, those lidars, those radars, we have a 300 to 400 meter, 360-degree 3D view of the world that we're operating in, and so we can see and react to things much quicker than a human could. So yeah, we're going to get the drivers out eventually, and people always ask when. We've kind of hinted that we may have some limited operations later this year, but the answer from our CEO down through me and everybody else is we will do it when it's safe to do so. We can't rush this technology. If we don't feel like we're 100% ready, then we're going to take the time to make sure we're 100% ready before we do those kind of things.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, there's still a few roadblocks you're trying to figure out, like places with extreme weather. And can you share any of the challenges? I know you said you're a pretty new company and autonomous trucking in general is pretty new. So what are some of those challenges that you're working to address?
Building the driving system, we've got, the team of, obviously brilliant engineers that can build a system that can drive a truck. People have been building systems since, You go back to the early 2000s is when autonomy really got kicked into high gear. The Defense Department sponsored, DARPA sponsored a couple challenges for people to build autonomous vehicles. So this has been going on for a little while. So building something that will drive from point A to point B, that technology has been there, and it's just gotten better with better sensors, better software, better chips. AI has been a game changer for us at Bot Auto. We we we've become a company in the post kind of chat GPT world, where a lot of our companies, our competitors, they started 7, 8, 10 years ago. That the technology was different. We have been able to move fast and move efficiently because we've been able to leverage that AI. But some of the challenges are, again, we can build a car or a truck that will drive from point A to point B. It's the things that happen in the middle. Well, when we talk about edge cases, and when you get in the engineering world, they talk about edge cases and corner cases, and those are things that don't happen every day, but when they do happen, could present significant safety challenges. So we have to be able to react to unexpected construction zones. We have to be able to, crash scenes or other emergency scenes on the road. We work on responding to hand gestures from a first responder or a construction worker. Those are the things. That's the details. That's where the things get. Um, it takes a little longer to work out, and we do that. We see those things regularly as we're driving, and every time our truck sees things, or anybody's trucks, in the development space sees things, then that becomes part of the library, right? That becomes part of the system, and we can take that back, and simulation plays a big role in that. Then we can simulate those things, and we can change those scenarios so that the truck experiences, at least in simulation, you know, uh, you know, variations of those edge cases and corner cases, so that we can be comfortable that they can handle anything that comes their way. So those are challenges, obviously. Bigger scale, some of the challenges, obviously public acceptance is important to us. We want the public at large, getting the message out that this is going to happen. It scares people, particularly people our age or a little bit older, like, oh, I don't know about that. That's pretty scary, right? So convincing a skeptical public, but also convincing skeptical regulators in some places, and skeptical legislatures in some place, that, hey, this is going to make our traffic environment, our highway environment, a safer place to operate. Yeah, absolutely. That's a big challenge. So that's in addition to doing the normal things that I do every day, as far as a safety manager, helping make sure our safety drivers are fully qualified, making sure our trucks are well maintained and in good mechanical condition and safe, traveling around, not just Texas, but the country. I mentioned, I think I was in Atlanta. I saw some Waymos down there. I think we mentioned earlier. So at a conference just yesterday, talking to folks from around the world about what we're doing in Texas and how we really think this Texas model, of how we're developing autonomous trucking, particularly down here, is a good model to export to the rest of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen those Waymos and I honestly can't wait to go for a ride in one. I don't know, have you ridden in one yet?
I have. I've a lot. So, obviously, in my former position, I worked not just in the trucking space, but I worked with those folks quite a bit. Got a lot of good friends over there. So when I retired, there was still a brief period of time here in Austin where Waymo was operating out of a Waymo app. And I got a friends and family code, so I could call Waymo anytime. Now they're on the Uber app. You just go in and set your settings in Uber to, I will take autonomous rides, and if one is available, they will send it to you. So now about a third of the time, I would say probably that I Uber here around Austin. I get an autonomous ride, and it's in a Waymo, and I mean it's awesome. The first time you do it, You get in and there's nobody in that driver's seat, and that's not what we're used to, right? So it's a little weird, but by the second or third time you've ridden in one, that just yeah, you kind of look forward to it. It's really awesome. They do a good job in the robo taxis of there's a screen on the dash, and there's a screen that is clearly visible from the back seat that lets you kind of see what the car is seeing, and so you can see that it's clearly identifying other vehicles, it's clearly identifying pedestrians, it's clearly identifying stationary objects, and you're seeing that entire environment that the car is seeing, and then you see it take the actions that it needs to kind of avoid all those things and make sure we're doing the thing safely. So yeah, I ride in them frequently. I rode in Cruise when Cruise was a thing. That was a GM product that they kind of pivoted out of a couple years ago. But yeah, I've been in a lot of them, and it's your first reaction is, man, this is magical, right? But it's then I remind myself that it's not magic. It's science, it's engineering. It's certainly amazing, but it's really hard science and engineering backed. And so I've always felt really comfortable in those cars and in our trucks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've spoken with a few people who all agree that if we had all autonomous vehicles on the roads, there would be very little accidents. The roads would be safer if all the vehicles on the roads were autonomous. We're a little far away from that point, I guess.
We are.
All the challenges you mentioned and of course regulations. But I will say one concern I hear a lot of people bring up is, yes, they might be safe from a driving standpoint, but what if somebody, cracks into their car and takes control of the vehicle? Because, once it's run by, once it's digital, people can hack in. So what are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, we talk about this all the time, and we certainly all of us, all of the developers have very robust cyber teams, right? Where we bring in, people, some of the top minds from places like NSA and places like that come to work in this space to help secure that, and we are very aware of that concern. Hasn't been a thing yet. Is someone going to try to do it? Yeah. I mean, bad people are going to try to do bad things. We get that. So, a couple things about our system at Bot particularly, and I think this is true across the board. They are not people. I think there's some kind of. I'll just say this: we can't operate our trucks remotely. We can make them stop or go remotely, basically, by pushing a button that tells the truck. So there is that link between the truck and someone. So we have to do everything we can to secure that, and it just becomes a matter um, of again securing those pathways. I mean, you think about it. Uh, Unmanned aircraft is the same thing, and they've solved that problem. NASA has solved this problem, and again, that's the caliber of people that we're bringing into this space are like NSA and NASA caliber engineers to help us secure our space. People are going to try. People are going to make a run at it. We're going to make a run at it. We're going to fault test, and we're going to test our own systems to make sure that that's not um, you know not possible before we're working remotely. But yeah, all I can say is we're aware of the concern. We share the concern, but we feel like we've got the solutions.
Awesome. And now you mentioned that you're operating in Texas because the regulations are a lot less. So, what challenges are there when it comes to meeting regulations if you're trying to expand across the US?
So some states in Texas, and Texas for years has had a very, very kind of relaxed regulatory scheme regarding um, autonomous vehicles. Basically included a self-certification. Yeah, that your vehicle can handle the rules of the road. It had to be equipped with a camera. It had to be registered, insured. Just very, very thin regulations. This past session, the legislature did act to kind of build a little bit, put some more guardrails on that system. And so now there is starting, in September, law will go into effect, and I believe and then we have got a period of 6 months or so to kind of implement everything. There's going to be a registration period in Texas, or a registration process in Texas through the Texas DMV, where we will have to register and certify that our equipment works as it's supposed to. We have to provide a first responder interaction plan or guide to Texas DPS, that they, certifying that we're educating and that we can safely interact with first responders, whether that be police, whether that be fire, EMS, or others, right? And so we're doing that. So Texas is still, but if we don't do those things, then there is a mechanism to remove our registration in Texas, to suspend, revoke, deny our ability to operate in Texas. Now, as you move to other states, some states have an outright prohibition on the testing of particularly large autonomous vehicles. Again, we did this the space that we're in kind of divides along the lines of the robotaxis, which are passenger cars, and then our product, which are large commercial trucks. And even in some states that allow testing or operation of the smaller vehicles, there's a prohibition on vehicles over 10,000 pounds. And there's, just differences in government schemes and regulatory outlook. Some states, even if they're going to allow it, they're going to allow, they're going to, they're going to have a very stringent, regulatory or permitting scheme, and maybe very expensive, make it, cost prohibitive to operate in various places. Then this is really important for trucks, ultimately we want to engage in interstate commerce. We want, we envision a time when we're going from Jacksonville, Florida to the port of Los Angeles, right? And we feel like we can do that faster. We feel like we can do that more efficiently. We feel like we can do that more safely, and we feel like we can do that more economically. But that becomes problematic if the rules aren't standard across that operating area. And we see that we talk often within our space about the patchwork of state regulations that we see. And we're really, as Texans, you live here, we know we're loath to ask for federal intervention on a lot of things, but we really do need some federal leadership on this from the USDOT and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, NHTSA, those DOT agencies. We need a federal framework that says this is what you can do in interstate commerce. And these maybe are some of the requirements, and that would standardize that across the landscape, and that would help us expand our footprint when the time comes. So we're hoping we get that soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, you mentioned efficiency, safety. It's going to speed things up. It's going to reduce costs for companies. It's going to be great for companies. So, here's the next question. The trucking industry provides a lot of jobs. So, I'm sure there's some buck back about loss of jobs across the US if autonomous trucking picks up. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, we talk about this all the time. Organized labor in states that have large presence of organized labor, obviously are wary of what we're doing. And so that this is a question we deal with pretty regularly. I start with number one, we love truck drivers. We hire, we're still hiring truck drivers. We've talked about, ultimately our goal will never be 100%. Our fleet will never be 100% autonomous at Bot Auto. And at Bot Auto, we intend to be the fleet. We're not selling our technology to an OEM. We're not selling to GM or Ford or Kenworth. We're going to operate our own trucks, but our trucks will always be mixed fleet operations. So that is our business model. We will always need drivers, even within our operation. But when you look at the landscape of trucking, depending on who you ask, at any given time 70 to 80,000 open trucking jobs, in the country. So in the short to midterm, we feel like we're simply filling, that void. We're helping provide that supply chain resiliency. It may change the nature of some of the jobs. Yeah, we want to handle a particular portion of that journey. If that journey is from Houston, Texas to Phoenix, Arizona, we want to go from the outskirts of Phoenix to the outskirts of Houston. But we need drivers to do the pickup, the delivery. We're always going to need drivers to do that. There's still going to be those jobs, and we're a long way from this, being the norm or the majority of trucking. So we feel like that's it's not a tremendous concern. Could it change the nature of some trucking jobs? It will. Is it going to eliminate trucking jobs? Not in our lifetimes. And then we need people to do things that 5 years ago were never envisioned. Our trucks have to be, we participate in a program where our trucks have to be, when they operate autonomously, have to be inspected thoroughly once every 24 hours, or in some cases more often. And that's a 100% defect free at the time of dispatch inspection. So we've got to train people to do that. And we need people with knowledge of trucks and trucking. So some of these folks that may have got into trucking, which by the way, young people just aren't getting into trucking in huge numbers. And so that shortage that we talked about is getting bigger and bigger. We're creating those technician type jobs, those inspector type jobs. We're giving local and regional jobs in our mixed fleet operations to folks that still want to drive a truck but want to be home every night or most nights of a week instead of driving, coast to coast like they did. So we hear those concerns. We appreciate that those concerns are out there, but again, we feel like we're not taking trucking jobs. We're simply filling the gap and creating maybe slightly different but better trucking jobs for those that want to remain in the space.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there any key takeaways you can leave our audience with today?
Man, I got into this space, and it, we talked about my journey at the beginning, and when I walked through the doors at the Texas Highway Patrol, 27, 28 years ago, never in my world did I think I'd be working for a tech startup in my 50s, right? But here I am, and, living my best life. And the reason I'm here is because we have a epidemic on our national and Texas highways of traffic fatalities. 40,000 people a year dying in traffic crashes, and that's too many. And so as I got more and more involved in this, in autonomy and working with autonomy and doing these things, I became convinced that autonomy can be part of that solution to, I like to tell people we haven't had a deathless day on Texas highways since November of 2000. So we're coming up on 25 years. Every day in Texas, at least one person has lost their life on Texas highways. And can we get back? Can we get that one deathless day, and then maybe two, and then maybe we can string a couple together. And so I truly believe that autonomy. We're not going to quit building more highway lanes. We're not going to quit hiring great enforcement personnel and regulatory personnel we're not going to quit doing any of that. The state's going to continue to do those things, but autonomy, because of those things we talked about, the 100% focus on the driving task 100% of the time, I'm convinced that autonomy is going to be part of the solution, and maybe a large part of the solution. And I've worked my entire life, my entire career, to try to reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities on Texas highways. And I think really for the first time in my adult life, in my professional life, this gives us a chance to, if not turn the tide, stem the tide and save lives, and keep those people coming home for Christmas and Thanksgiving and birthdays and other celebrations, so that people don't have to mourn the loss of loved ones. And so that's the key takeaway: is we're going to save lives.
Well, that's a wonderful mission. Thanks for all you're doing to work towards it. And thanks again for coming on the show.
You bet. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be one of your early guests. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. And thanks to our audience. Have a great day.